Curse of the Cat People is a psychological horror film from 1944. Well, kind of. We'll get into that later. The film is a sequel to the groundbreaking horror movie Cat People, and follows the daughter of two characters from that film. Anne Carter plays the daughter and is a bit of an outcast amongst her peers. She has trouble making friends and often finds herself lost in her personal fantasies. This bothers her parents, played by Kent Smith and Jane Randolph, as it reminds them of Smith's deceased ex-wife, Irina, played by Simone Simon, who had an untimely death. As they pressure Carter to act more like other kids, she finds herself emotionally lost. That is until she befriends an apparition who just so happens to look and sound like Kent's ex-wife. That's the best way I can describe the film without summarizing every scene that happens. Now, from that description, you might get the impression that the script jumbles a lot of stuff together, but thankfully, that's not the case at all. It just has a lot of elements interwoven throughout the runtime. The script does a great job balancing everything, and it all seems straightforward when you watch it. Well, even then, that's not 100% true. Like its predecessor, Curse of the Cat People plays around with ambiguity. You never really know if this is the ghost of Simone Simon, or if it's all in Anne Carter's head. Early in the film, Carter sees a picture of Simon for the first time, and their otherworldly encounters start a little bit after that. It could be that this resemblance is just an unconscious choice by Carter's mind when she yearns for a friend, or maybe Simon's love for Smith is so great that she felt the need to intervene to help his daughter. That's just one of the many subtleties that adds to the quality of the film. I said in the beginning that this is considered a horror film, but honestly, I don't think it is. It's more of a fantastical character study. If it wasn't for the title and the connection to the previous film, I think people would classify this differently. I think the film is more of a Christmas movie. Yeah, just say that out loud. Curse of the Cat People is a Christmas movie. You might think it sounds silly, but I do usually find myself wanting to rewatch this around December. There's a good message about family and appreciating the people around you. On top of that, the film is filled with beautiful shots of snowy landscapes, and the score helps to create a whimsical mood to many scenes. But don't get me wrong, there are moments of horror in the film. Nothing as striking as the first film, but somehow just as memorable. One of the highlights of the movie is a neighbor, played by Julia Dean. She's a retired stage actress who also lives a little too much in her head. There's a scene where she tells Carter the legend of the Headless Horseman, and she goes out of her way to make it as theatrical as possible. It reminds me of being a kid and having an adult tell you a scary story over a campfire. As the story progresses, the lighting on Dean slightly changes, adding to the idea that this is being viewed through the lens of a frightened child. The film is often cited by child psychologists as one of the most accurate depictions of a troubled kid, many saying that it was ahead of its time. I think this is due to the fact that writer-producer Val Lewton interjected a lot of his personal experiences from his childhood into the story. There's a scene early on where they're celebrating Carter's birthday, but no one ever shows up. Upon inspection, the parents realize Carter placed all the invitations in a tree that, when she was a little kid, she was told was a magical mailbox. Apparently, Lewton did the same thing as a kid, but with his sister's birthday invitations instead. On top of that, Val Lewton's wife once described her husband as a man who never truly entered the real world as an adult. Film historian William K. Everson once compared this film to Jean Cocteau's Beauty and the Beast from 1946, and honestly, I understand where he's coming from. There's a haunting beauty over both films that project you into moods that are unlike anything else from the time, and it might sound pretentious to say, but I think the black and white cinematography really helps sell this. Cinematographer Nicholas Busaraka shot the original Cat People, as well as 3 other Val Lewton horrors, but I think this is his best work. He does a brilliant job using lighting to help tell the story. Anytime you see a glistening light, you know right away Simone Simon is coming, but it's not always bright and happy looking. Oftentimes, there's cascading shadows over every frame she's in. Somehow, Musaraka can make these shadows feel comforting. It's amazing when, a couple scenes later, he uses similar techniques to make the audience feel uneasy. Honestly, all that's missing from the more traditional horror scenes is the glistening light. It's remarkable how he's able to transform the frame with so little adjustments. One of my favorite pieces of trivia is that this was Robert Wise's directorial debut. Wise was an editor at RKO who worked closely with Orson Welles, and was even nominated for an Oscar for editing Citizen Kane. To direct this film, Lewton hired Gunther von Fritsch, who was very talented but not able to maintain the quick pace of a B-movie unit. So Lewton decided to give Wise a chance, and the rest is history. Wise would go on to win 2 directing Oscars for West Side Story and The Sound of Music. However, if you want to be technical, this actually isn't Wise's first time directing. For Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons, made 2 years earlier, RKO wanted a new ending, but Welles was unavailable, so they entrusted the film's editor, Robert Wise, to shoot it. But famously, Cat People and Curse of the Cat People reused sets from The Magnificent Ambersons. So either way, Robert Wise made his directorial debut with The Magnificent Ambersons sets. Now, let's talk about the performances, because there's a lot of great ones here. Kent Smith and Jane Randolph do exceptional jobs further developing their characters from the previous film. They don't feel like rehashes of the same material. It feels like they've grown as people, and they carry themselves differently now that they have a child in their lives. Sir Lancelot was a Calypso singer/actor who had previous roles in 2 Lewton films, and although I think this is his weakest performance of the 3, he's still an enjoyable presence here. I mentioned Julia Dean before, who adds to the ambiguity of Carter's journey. Dean treads the fine line between gentle understanding and insanity. It seems like she's the only character who gives Carter any care, but there are times where Dean says things that make you question her mental state, so you're unsure if she's just trying to nurture Carter in an unconventional way, or if Dean's lost her mind. You never truly know which way to lean, and I give full credit to Dean for this, because this easily could have come off as very hokey. However, Dean's performance wouldn't be as great if it wasn't for Elizabeth Russell, who plays Dean's daughter/caretaker. Russell had a small but memorable role in Cat People as one of Simone Simon's fellow countrywomen. Here, she gets a juicy supporting role as a neglected but tortured soul. Throughout the film, Dean is convinced that Russell is an imposter and her real daughter died years ago. These comments take a visible toll on Russell throughout the film, and you can tell she's doing her best to hold it all together. But things get complicated when Carter enters their lives, and Russell sees her mother giving Carter the affection she desires. Russell is never without a stern look in this film, and it becomes unsettling when you start to see her crack. On the opposite side of the spectrum is Simone Simon, who gives a touching performance as Irina's apparition. There's a warm tenderness to her that's almost contagious. With everything Carter is going through, you understand why she yearns for Simon's friendship. But like Smith and Randolph, it feels like the same character. She's just changed due to her further experiences. And as much as I'm praising this cast, the one who steals the show is Anne Carter. She's not just impressive for this movie, but for the time too. There were certainly talented child actors from this era, like Margaret O'Brien and Dean Stockwell, but none of them were doing what Carter is doing. She does an excellent job conveying an underlying loneliness that's constantly masked by a sense of wonder. Although you get the idea that Carter is always happiest when she's playing pretend, you can tell she yearns for something more. Your heart breaks every time she attempts to make some sort of connection with other children, but is rejected. When Simon comes in, you're almost relieved that she has someone to finally bond with. That is, if you believe it's really her. The best part is that Carter never goes over the top. She downplays most of her scenes, which honestly makes them feel more realistic. Calling back to the Headless Horseman scene, Carter plays the moment with a slow facial transformation. She's trying not to show that she's scared, but we can tell the story is getting under her skin. Honestly, I think what it all boils down to is the fact that Carter is just very likable. She's sweet and really does a great job capturing a childhood innocence. It makes her relatable even if you didn't have this strong of an imagination as a kid. Born in 1936, Carter got her start at age 4 when she was spotted on a bus by someone who worked at 20th Century Fox. This led to a small role in The Last of the Duanes, and a steady stream of parts followed. Carter's mother always wanted to be an actress, but her father wouldn't allow her to do so. So Anne Carter's career was motivated by her mother's personal desires rather than her own. But with that being said, it seems like Carter enjoyed starring in films. She cited a personal highlight of her career being when she starred in The Two Mrs. Carols with Humphrey Bogart and Barbara Stanwyck. She also recalled many fond memories of starring with Bing Crosby and William Bendix and a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court. The only leading role she ever received was for Curse of the Cat People, and her performance is often lauded as one of the best parts of the film. As she entered her young adult years, acting jobs decreased in stature, and she found herself taking on more uncredited roles. Her final role was in a film I previously reviewed, Member of the Wedding from 1952. She had a small role as one of the neighborhood girls. It was on this set that Carter began to feel ill and found out she contracted polio. This is largely what led to the end of her acting career. She needed physical therapy and time to recuperate. She thankfully fully recovered and had the chance to audition for another film I previously reviewed, Not as a Stranger, and funny enough, both were produced by Stanley Kramer. But she was in college and chose not to do it because the day of her interview for that film was the day she had a final. Her mother was devastated, but Carter went on to get a degree, got married, and had a successful career as a high school and middle school teacher. Carter would often give interviews talking about her career and Curse of the Cat People in general. Most of her memories from Hollywood seemed to be positive, and she was grateful for the kind words fans gave her over the years. She would pass away in 2014 at age 77. So if you want to see one of the great performances from an underappreciated child actor, watch a beautifully haunting film, or discover a new Christmas classic, then I highly recommend Curse of the Cat People.